Everywhere you look right now, someone's sipping on a pastel-coloured electrolyte drink, thinking it's their secret to eternal youth. We've got skin patches, chews, powders, coconut water in disguise. We've well and truly hit this peak in electrolyte trend that's happening at the moment. Social media would have you believe that plain water is just dangerous for you. And unless you're adding a sachet of something coloured and salty to everything that you drink, you're missing out on some sort of hydration edge. And look, I get it. Electrolytes sound sexy and sciencey. The marketing is so slick, especially the stuff that I see targeted to women. It's sexy, it's sparkly, and it's selling hard at the moment. But just because something says it's an electrolyte drink doesn't mean that it's doing what you think it's doing. Recently, I was interviewed for the Australian Financial Review on exactly this, the rise of electrolyte drinks in the general population, where people think that they are missing a competitive edge by not doing it. So today, I wanted to expand on that and cut through some of the hype and get into the actual science behind when, why, and how to use electrolyte drinks properly from an endurance athlete perspective, not as someone sipping their hydration beverage on the way to Pilates on the weekend. We're going to unpack some of the details around how unique your hydration needs are, the dangers of overhydrating with water, when electrolytes really matter for us, and some practical tips on how to pick a product that is more right for you. Let's do it. Electrolyte drinks are everywhere right now. We've got powders, pills, tablets, capsules, chews, even skin patches, promising to deliver magic minerals straight through your arm. We have hit this peak electrolyte trend, and social media would have you believe that if you're not sipping on these things daily with some fancy packaging on your walk to the coffee shop, then you're missing out on some sort of wellness miracle that we all need. I was recently asked to contribute to an article in the Australian Financial Review all about this trend, the rise of electrolyte drinks in the general population. And I'll tell you what I told the journalist, that unless you're training for long periods of time, potentially in the heat and humidity and sweating bucket loads, you are probably just making expensive pee. Electrolytes are marketed to help you rehydrate faster, boost your energy, especially for women, in pretty pastel-coloured bottles and sachets that look like candy, that make you feel like you're doing a good thing for your health if you're consuming them. But I want to clear something up. Just because it's labelled as an electrolyte drink doesn't mean it's necessary for you or even useful. But for us as triathletes, we do need to understand electrolytes more deeply because we're training for a long period of time. But it's not something we want to be sipping on between Pilates and a brunch date. It's because we're training hard, training long, and generally in conditions where our sweat loss actually matters. The most important electrolyte that we lose in sweat is sodium. We do lose a little bit of potassium, magnesium, and calcium, but sodium really is the big dog. It's the main one we need to concentrate on. We only lose small amounts of those other electrolytes in our sweat. Sodium is the one that you want to pay attention to, but your sodium loss in your sweat varies widely between individuals. And that's why your electrolyte needs become important for you. More on that later. But for now, I just want to call out that marketing BS because as athletes, we need to make better, smarter decisions based on actual science and things that are going to enhance our performance, not the latest TikTok trend or what the lady in the health food shop told you that you need for your health. So let's get a little bit nerdy. Your individual electrolyte needs are unique to you because your sweat rate and your sweat concentration of electrolytes is unique to you. You're not going to sweat the same amount as your training buddy next to you, as well as your sweat sodium concentration is not going to be the same as the person next to you or even somebody with the exact same sweat rate as you. Sweat rate and sweat sodium concentration can vary so largely between athletes that I've seen triathletes lose as little as 200 milligrams of sodium per litre of sweat, all the way up to over 2,000 milligrams per litre. Now, that is a 10-fold difference. And that is why generic advice pulled off the internet with no background is not going to cut it in this space. Your sweat rate is influenced by lots of factors. To name a few, we've got your genetics, your training status, your fitness levels, your body size, and a big one obviously is the environment. How hot or humid is it versus cold and not so humid? Now, if you're training outside in the heat at 35 degrees Celsius, which is 95 Fahrenheit, versus you're indoors on the trainer, it's freezing, it's the middle of winter, your hydration needs are going to be very different. You're the same athlete, but you have a completely different sweat profile. Some of you might have noticed that you've got little salty crusts on your nicks or on your running singlets after you do a long session, whereas others look like they've barely broken a sweat. You might do a wind trainer session as a group, and some athletes just have a massive puddle below their bikes, whereas others don't even have any drips. Most athletes, I would suggest, don't actually know what they're losing. Inside the Triathlon Nutrition Academy program, I teach my athletes how to actually calculate their sweat rate to understand what's going on for them, as well as some ways to measure your sweat sodium concentration. Then, importantly, what do you do with that data? How do you then apply those numbers practically to what goes on during your training and during your racing? That is the most important step that, again, athletes often have no idea how to do. Importantly, it's not one single test and set and forget, and that is your number forever. It is something that you'll need to continue doing over time and over the long term so that you can understand what is your personal story. And that is why I love to educate triathletes on how to do this for themselves so that you have the longevity in making these changes as things change for you. One of my TNA athletes, Chris, let's just call him the human sprinkler. He was having major issues with training and racing and DNFing all over the place, and he just had no idea how to figure it out. He thought it was a fueling problem. He knew he was a heavy sweater, hence the human sprinkler, but he had no idea about how much exactly and then how to then compensate for the human sprinkler vibes. But what I showed him was how to do his own testing so that he could understand what was going on for him, figured out he was a very salty margarita, and then we worked on how to fix the issues that were going on, how to train his gut to absorb what he needed to, how to dial in the right products for him to meet his needs. And now I'm stoked to say that he doesn't have any issues anymore. And the lesson is sweat is more than just water. Your needs are unique to you, so you really need to upskill yourself in this and test yourself to understand what is going on. I cannot tell you what to do. You need to understand your unique needs. Before diving into some practical stuff, I do want to highlight one of the key things that not a lot of triathletes are aware of, and that's hyponatremia. Hyponatremia happens when your body's sodium levels drop too low. And in endurance sport like triathlon, it usually comes from over drinking or drinking too much, plus or minus, without replacing the sodium that you're losing in sweat. It can be twofold. It sounds harmless because you're just trying to stay hydrated, right? And maybe you're walking through aid stations more. Maybe you're doing a slower race or a slower run that you thought that you were going to do, and you're still just drinking as per your plan. But in long races, particularly full distance, things like an Ironman, I've seen athletes completely fall apart because of this, and it's actually life-threatening. You might start feeling a bit off, nauseous, bloated, even a little bit foggy, and you think, oh man, maybe I'm dehydrated. And so you drink more, but that just makes it worse. In extreme cases, it can lead to confusion, vomiting, seizures, collapse. And yes, people have ended up in the medical tent and in hospital because of hyponatremia. So it's no longer just a performance issue. It's a really important health one that we need to get a head around. And that is why sometimes the idea that we drink to thirst doesn't hold up, because we can have the best of intentions and think we're doing a great job of preventing dehydration, staying hydrated, but there's this full end of the spectrum of being dehydrated and then overdoing it with fluid intake as well. And we want to avoid both ends of that spectrum. We need to find that sweet spot, which is unique to you as an individual. So how do you know when to use electrolytes? It is easy to get swept up in this hype. Fancy sachets, promises of better hydration, faster recovery. And all these crazy people on Instagram telling us that water's not hydrating you, particularly if you have a whole food diet, you're not getting enough electrolytes from your food. A good rule of thumb, and something that was shared in the Australian Financial Review article, is that if you're training for longer than about 4 hours, or it's hot, or you're a heavy or really salty sweater, then electrolytes are going to matter for you. There's a new review paper published this year, 2025, that I can link in the show notes if you do want to get nerdy, that dove into that balance between fluid and sodium. A lot of the issues that athletes struggle with, like cramping, gut upset, hyponatremia, come from this mismatch of what you're losing versus what you're putting back in for replacement. If you are just smashing back liters, ounces of plain water during long sessions without replacing sodium, then you are potentially setting yourself up for disaster. But importantly, what this review also reinforced was that athletes don't need to be replacing sodium on a daily basis. We can get more than enough through food alone, especially if we're eating properly as a triathlete. We're not restricting ourselves all the time. Because, fun fact, there is more sodium in 2 slices of bread than there is in a bottle of Gatorade. So when are electrolytes going to help us? Long sessions, hot and humid conditions, high sweat rate athletes, and those that have like that salty crust on their clothing, and race day for longer course events like 70.3 full distance racing. Outside of that, unless you're any of those things, then water is probably okay as long as you're eating food and electrolytes that come from food. You need to remember that the electrolyte piece of the puzzle is a tool in your toolkit. It is not a magic pill and not a magic fix. Just like that example with Chris, it's multifactorial, and it's really understanding you and your needs to get to the bottom of what is causing the problem so that we can then move forwards and fix it. We want to make it based on you, not some random Instagram influencer's morning routine. Okay, so we figured out like when to use electrolytes. We know we need to understand our unique needs. The other piece of the puzzle is how on earth do you figure out what electrolyte product to use? There are so many different options. It's hard to navigate through the millions of choices that we have because the shelves are just flooded with options, and more so now than they used to be. You've got powders, you've got tablets, you've got capsules, you've got drinks, you've got dissolvable strips, you've got lick things that a certain lick is a certain amount of milligrams of sodium. God knows how you figure that out, because what if somebody's surface area of their tongue is bigger than someone else's? Anyway, these are the things that I deliberate. But whichever option you're looking at, they all claim to be the best. But not all electrolyte products are created equal. The first thing you want to look at is sodium. Obviously, if we're talking about electrolytes and replacing sweat losses, then sodium is the big player here. So check sodium content. If your sweat rate is really high and your sweat sodium concentration is really high, then you're going to want and need a different product to somebody that is a not very salty sweater. And if it's got a little bit of sodium in it, but nothing to kind of write home about, then probably not worth your time if it's not going to come anywhere close to meeting your sweat needs. So check the sodium content first and foremost. The next thing you want to have a look at is the sugar or the carbohydrate content. Now, depending on what we're using it for and when, we might make different decisions here. If you're using your electrolytes like a full-on sports drink, a carbohydrate-containing liquid that has electrolytes in it as well, then that is a different conversation compared to just electrolytes with no carbohydrate in it and it's artificially sweetened. So check the label, see if it's providing carbohydrate, whether you need them or not, if it's serving a fueling purpose or not, and then make sure you factor that into your overall race plan as well. And that might help you decide whether that product is right for you or not. The delivery format, I think, is a big one, and people do chop and change and figure out what works best for them. Some people like the all-in-one sports drink, fueling electrolyte thing. Other people like that salt lick thing that I mentioned. Other people like capsules or tablets. The world is really your oyster when it comes to electrolyte replacement, and it might take a few goes to understand what actually feels good for you. Some people find that the capsules, they just feel with, and that's totally okay because there's lots of ways to skin a cat. You might also look for something that is really portable and easy to travel with if you're doing racing and training away from home. So finding a type of product that you like to use as well as what it's providing is key. You definitely want to avoid the fairy dust products. And these I call fairy dust because they have a little bit of every electrolyte known to man in them so that they look super impressive on the label, but really they're doing jack shit to provide any decent amount any decent amounts of sodium that are going to help us. Like I said right in the beginning, your other electrolytes that you lose in sweat, like your magnesium, potassium, calcium, we do lose them, but we don't need to look at significantly replacing them. And some products have huge amounts of these things in them as well, and we need to make sure we're not actually exceeding our requirements for them too. Finally, we want to choose something that is palatable to us. There is no point having this perfectly concocted thing on paper if you can't actually consume it. If it is so salty, it's like drinking seawater. If you don't like it, you're not going to drink it. And then you run the risk of being underhydrated anyway. So find something that you enjoy, that you tolerate, and meets your needs for the conditions that you're training and racing in, particularly in the heat. So brief summary. So that's your really brief crash course in choosing the right electrolytes. Please don't fall for shiny packaging and all these fluffy claims that you can't make sense of. Choose a product that matches your specific sweat needs, your race conditions, and your body. And if you need help building that personalized hydration strategy, actually based on your data, that is exactly what I can teach you inside the Triathlon Nutrition Academy. So there you have it, a bit of a dive into all things electrolytes. Hopefully now you can see past all of that marketing BS and understand your unique hydration needs a little bit better and know where you need to go to get the right answer. Electrolyte drinks aren't bad, but they're also not a magic pill. And we need to be much more strategic around the types of products we're using, how much we're taking, and when we're using them so that it is specific to you. They are great tools, but it is a tool that you need to understand properly based on your training load, your sweat rate, your sweat sodium concentration, and your racing conditions for your key race that you're planning to do. So if you are serious about dialing in your entire hydration strategy and everything else that goes with triathlon nutrition, that is exactly what I can help you do inside the Triathlon Nutrition Academy program. We go beyond the basics that I'll only ever talk about on the podcast, teaching you how to actually calculate it specific for you, test your sweat sodium, and apply it all to build a personalized hydration plan that aligns perfectly with your entire race plan for the real world. So if you're ready to stop guessing and start actually getting results, head to dietitianapproved.com/academy and register your interest in our next intake. And until next time, skip the fairy dust, please. Use your brain. You're an intelligent person, and hydrate and use those electrolytes strategically. See you next week.